Hello everyone and welcome back to another Hard Count podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the Baltimore Ravens and specifically their star quarterback Lamar Jackson. We all know Lamar Jackson, last year's MVP, very exciting young player that we hope to be able to stay electric for years to come. But this season, Lamar Jackson's Ravens have kind of gone under the radar after that loss to the Chiefs in Week 3 that they've not been talked about too much. People are questioning how good they really are, questioning if Lamar can win in the big games, and making assumptions about Lamar Jackson's play. But what if I told you that Lamar Jackson is better than he was last year? What if I told you that Lamar Jackson is even more valuable to the Ravens offense than he was last season when he won MVP? And just maybe the Ravens are ready for the playoffs this season. So the questions we're going to be answering today are: if and why Lamar Jackson is better than he was last season, and is it time we can finally see the Ravens have some playoff success? Lamar Jackson won MVP last season, and let me be clear, I do not actually think Lamar Jackson was the most valuable player last season. I think that Russell Wilson was last year, and that's not a knock on Lamar. Lamar was great last year, just Wilson had a fantastic year, and just because I think he's more valuable than he was last year doesn't mean I think he should win MVP this year. There's some guys playing at a completely elite level right now, and I think better than Lamar Jackson has been. But let's start with why Lamar Jackson is better than he was last season. How could that be possible? The Ravens' offense is worse this year than it was last year, but that has nothing to do with Lamar Jackson and his play. The Ravens' offense last year was new, something the NFL had never seen before. The league was still catching up. And even towards the end of the season, we started to see the offense slowing down a little bit. And now the league has had an entire offseason to watch this Ravens offense and see how it was run. Regression is going to happen. That is okay. The Ravens offense is still good. It just can't rely as much on the things that were always there for them last season. Last year, the Ravens offense was centered around Lamar Jackson's rushing ability, as it should have been, and combining it with read option, Mark Ingram. Like we see here, Lamar Jackson using this option to either hand it off to the running back in Mark Ingram or Gus Edwards, or using his rushing ability to take it. In this play, he takes it and turns it into a big play. And then here we see Lamar Jackson actually give the ball to Ingram because he's not in a position to run himself, and we see a big gain. The rushing attack for the Ravens was very efficient last year. It is not as much this year. And in the passing game, the common thing we saw, especially in third down situations, is something like this. Mark Andrews just runs straight down the middle of the field or runs a little post route, in route, and Lamar Jackson hits him on his first read. So that worked for the Ravens last year. There was no reason to change things. Lamar Jackson looked fantastic last year, and he was very, very good. But he looked fantastic last year because everything the Ravens did worked. And so Lamar Jackson didn't have to make anything happen himself. I'm not saying he could not have, but it's always going to look great when you don't have to make anything and everything is there for you. We're kind of seeing a little bit of that with Tom Brady this year. And last season, Lamar Jackson struggled a little bit more when everything wasn't so easy in that read option, when that read option wasn't as available and as efficient, and when Mark Andrews was not there on his first read. When he had to stand in the pocket, make a good throw into a tight window, is where Lamar Jackson struggled a little bit more. And that's when things often went down for the Baltimore Ravens and their offense. When the easy plays were not there, they could not run the time off the clock like they wanted to, and so things would go downhill. And we saw that multiple times in games last year where things didn't go their way and they struggled a little bit more. So how exactly is Lamar Jackson better than he was last season? Well, we all know he can run. We all know he's an explosive athlete. He's going to make plays with his legs. We know he's a good deep ball thrower. We all knew these things last season, and none of that has changed. As I said, what was Lamar Jackson's weakness last season? When did things end up going wrong for the Baltimore Ravens offense? And that was when those easy things, the read option and the easy throws to Mark Andrews on his first read, were not there. And after watching every single play of every single Ravens game, I can say that NFL defenses have figured out how to stop some of what the Ravens did last year in those read options. And they're learning to cover Mark Andrews more frequently. Those easy things that were there for the Ravens last year are not there nearly as much for them. And Lamar is stepping up and running this offense well, even though those things are not there. This Ravens offense last year could have ran without Lamar Jackson. It was those things that they were running on were open. And a lot of quarterbacks could have done that. Well, obviously Lamar Jackson elevated the offense to a completely new level, but it would have been fine. It would have been a fine offense with anyone else. This season, Lamar Jackson is the offense. And for all the people that out there saying Lamar Jackson is worse this season, that's completely wrong. Because if the running game was just as efficient as it was last year, if the read option hadn't been figured out, if the rest of the NFL was still catching up to what the Ravens were doing, Lamar Jackson would be putting up better stats and rolling over teams just like he did last year. That's the reality of it. But those things are not there for the Ravens offense this season. So we have seen an evolution in Lamar Jackson's game. He can still use his mobility, but we've seen more plays like this, the ability to drop back, use his mobility if he needs to, make a great tight window throw. And I will say, the Ravens offense as a whole is not as good as it was last season, but Lamar Jackson is just as good and better than he was last season. He's still the same dynamic runner, the same big play kind of guy. But we've seen another building block, the ability to more comfortably make the throws he needs to make consistently through the course of the game if he's forced to drop back and make a play. So that is our answer to the question. Lamar Jackson is better than he was last season. Now, what about everybody's big concern? What about the big question for the Ravens and a reason that many people have their questions about them for this season that's happening right now? Can the Ravens win when it matters the most in the playoffs? And we have seen what happens to the Ravens the past couple years in the playoffs. Yeah. Not good. They've let us down in every sense of the word in the past 2 years, but is it going to happen again? That's what matters at this point. I don't think so, because the playoffs is where that read option isn't there. The playoffs is where that easy completion of Mark Andrews on third down is not there. The playoffs is when you have to make plays that are not there, drop back and hit that tight window throw. That is the difference between regular season and playoff success. And that is where Lamar Jackson is much better than he was last season. So, to wrap it up, Lamar Jackson is better than he was last season and is in a perfect position to lead the Baltimore Ravens on a Super Bowl run. All right, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you're a Ravens fan, I'm sure those were good words to hear. Your boy Lamar is doing just fine. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, peace.